HR isn't just about policies and payroll, it's about people. But when our tools are clunky and disconnected, it's hard to stay focused on what matters most. And I think we can all agree that people matter most. That's why we listen to my podcast in the first place, I hope. And this is ultimately why I'm super excited to tell you about Intuit QuickBooks Payroll. QuickBooks Payroll isn't just for accounting, and it will totally help you manage it all. QuickBooks Payroll brings everything together: payroll, time tracking, HR, and accounting, all in one seamless platform. That way, you can spend less time chasing data and more time supporting your team, all without switching systems or adding complexity to your already complex job. Let's be frank, your jobs are complex. We all know this. And I have to tell you, someone in my family has their own business and uses QuickBooks Payroll, and they love it because it integrates with everything. They have, ultimately within the integration, AI and automation handle all of the heavy lifting, but its connection for payroll, time, and accounting helps them to understand their full financial picture. So they love it and they swear by it. So this is why I'm also really excited to tell you about it, because I know someone who uses it. So make sure you have a system that works for you so that you can show up fully for your people, as we all commit to doing. Discover how QuickBooks Payroll can help you today. Learn more by going to quickbooks.com/payroll. That's quickbooks.com/payroll. Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Traci Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. We are coming at you live, sort of, not really, with our last, I think it's our last, maybe I should check actually before I commit to this, but I think it's our last Policy Pulse episode of 2025. No, it totally is. I just checked. I am not incorrect. It's crazy. I think we've done so many of these, maybe like 6 of these or so over the last 6 or so months since we started these Policy Pulse segments. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback. I certainly have seen a ton of comments around these segments, so I'm glad everyone's enjoying them. And we will continue them in 2026 as well. But as a reminder, Bryan Driscoll is my co-host on these segments, and he is an attorney and helps us to navigate all of these very interesting moments in time where things change or may change, and we need to know as HR leaders how we navigate those changes. So for this November episode of the Policy Pulse and last of 2025, we're going to start off with this first topic, which is that there's a new EEOC chair, Andrea Lucas. She was sworn in last week. So by the time we're recording this, it actually is last week because, 2 weeks by the time this launches, I guess, 2 weeks ago.
It was November 6th.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Thank you. So the agency's ability to take action is now restored. Lucas, who is an appointee by President Trump, has built her career questioning corporate DEI initiatives and emphasizing race and sex neutral enforcement. That means we're likely heading into a period where the EEOC reinterprets long-standing protections in ways that roll back progress made under the Biden administration. Bryan, I know that there are a number of things that could potentially change with this new appointing of Andrea Lucas, but do you mind walking us through what those potential changes are?
Yeah, sure. And I think just to restate what you just said one more time for everybody, it is potential. None of this is actual yet. These are just things that we will most likely see in some way, shape, or form. So big picture, we're going to see continued rollback of DEI. We're expecting to see a lot of guidance from the EEOC about rules treating some diversity efforts as possible discrimination against majority employees. So that means that, and this is advice that I think we've been giving every time we've talked about DEI programs this year, is that you need to make sure that your DEI programs are not quota-based. They're not preferential. You need to audit your programs. This doesn't mean that you can't have DEI programs. You absolutely can. But what it means is that you need to take some steps to audit those programs and make sure that you're going to be compliant with some of these rollbacks that we're most likely going to see. Another one that I definitely think is unfortunately going to be on the audit block for the new EEOC is the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. Um, we're probably going to see rollbacks of protected leave for that. Essentially, for people who aren't intimately familiar with it, the easiest way to sum up the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is that it provides ADA-like benefits and rights to pregnant workers. That's the simplest way to make that comparison. So what does HR need to do if this happens or in anticipation of this? Simply, as with everything, monitor it closely. These accommodation policies may need to be rewritten if the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is rolled back um, in any fashion. I think this one is going to be a challenge for a lot of employers to handle correctly, and they're going to have some pushback from employees. So you may need to create your own internal programs to sort of counteract some of the rollbacks we see at the federal level. Well, we're also
That's
expecting to
interesting.
see,
I actually have a
yeah,
question about that too.
uh-huh.
Um, it, is there, I mean, I think there is, but is there protection under the ADA for pregnancy already, or is the impact that the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act also includes like abortion related leaves that the ADA
Yeah,
might not necessarily
the
cover?
pregnant, that's exactly right. So the ADA provides for job protected leave. So if you're out on leave, your job is protected. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act also, like you said, provides for some expanded benefits, expanded protections around abortion related leave. So you can take leave
Got it.
for a couple of days to go have a procedure if you need to recover from that procedure. That is protected under the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which will probably go away under this new EEOC leadership. Now, that's not to say
Got it.
that states that have similar laws, and we'll talk about this. This is another theme that you and I have talked about a lot in these segments, is that states have some pregnant workers acts of their own on the books, or have different laws that protect pregnant workers or for abortion related leave. So if you're in one of those states, you have to pay attention to those state laws. The general rule of thumb is you always go with the stricter law. So if the federal law doesn't, if there's no federal law saying anything about protection for pregnant workers, but you are in California and there is a law saying that you have protection for pregnant workers, then you need to follow that California law.
Got it. And then another question I'm curious about, if let's say a woman does go and have an abortion or similar procedure, um they in theory don't have to even disclose that that's what they're going to receive from their to when they communicate to their employer. Could they potentially, let's say it's rolled back, rather than, because I think people generally kind of like freak out when these things happen, rightfully so. It's concerning when something that you have is then taken away, um or I should say have access to is taken away. But let's say for all intents and purposes it's rolled back and someone does have an abortion. Could they just receive a doctor's note saying that they need time off from work because of a medical procedure or a procedure, not give any information, and still have coverage at least? But I guess maybe it would depend on the state and the company um specifics around like what's covered. But in most cases, when you have something that's like a personal procedure, you could always use sick time. I don't know. I'm just thinking of like other ways that someone could still have the coverage that they need without needing to disclose, what they're getting done.
Yeah, you're right. There are other options. You can use sick days, you can use PTO. The whole point of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is so that you don't have to tap into this
Yeah,
other
right,
time off bucket. Yeah, in
right.
theory, yes, you could do some of those things that you mentioned. I do think that's a really interesting question because I do think we will see some things like that. Um, Especially in some really red states that are already sort of putting the hammer down on abortion care, abortion procedures,
Mm-hmm.
even out of their state borders. So I think that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be
Mm-hmm.
uh, an interesting legal battle, honestly, that will probably happen if the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is rolled back. I think that is absolutely something we could see, and I think that um, employers need to understand sort of where the line is, on what
Yeah.
they can request from employees. Exactly to your point, if someone needs to go and get an abortion, do they have to say, I'm taking 3 days off to go get an abortion? No, they don't.
Right.
So,
Right.
like, employers need to sort of understand where that line is on how much they can request documentation, sure, but what can it be? It can in some cases simply be a one-line note from the doctor saying that your employee was out for these 3 days due to a medical procedure.
Right. Anyway, continue. Thank you. I asked you a bunch of questions related to that.
No, I think it's important to discuss these things because there is a lot of nuance to all of these things, and the EEOC
Yeah.
is
Yeah, for sure.
often not great at giving real specific guidance, to some of these topics. So the next thing on
Right.
on the list of potential rollbacks that we could see, our religious and gender identity conflicts. I'm expecting that we will probably see some stronger protections for employees citing religious objections. We'll
Mm.
probably see narrower interpretations of gender identity, and possible new rules around bathroom use,
Mm-hmm.
pronoun use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it it's going to be another one of those contentious issues, that I think we'll
Mm-hmm.
see. And I think, kind of a theme with all of these things. I think with this new EEOC leadership and with, some unprecedented terminations of some other EEOC members earlier this year, I think we're going to see the EEOC turn into more of a policy body instead of an investigatory body. I think we're going to see fewer investigations, broadly speaking. I think we're going to see more targeted investigations, religious and gender identity being one of those potential categories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that too. I mean, it's interesting. It all comes back to that one segment that we did where we talked about the whiplash of being in HR. That, every 4 years, and even within those 4 years, we're like back and forth, and how do we adjust and adapt. Um, and also, I think to your point too, that depending on the state protections, some of this might not really have as much of an impact. Like for people like me in New York, where there are pretty strong protections for workers. But it's definitely interesting, and we'll have to continue to watch, especially as we go into 2026.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think that I think that we'll see, sort of related to the religious and gender identity, I think we'll also see some reverse discrimination, enforcement. I think the EEOC, going to the sort of targeted investigation comment that I just made, I think we'll see the EEOC
Hmm.
give new weight to claims of alleged reverse discrimination, and
Mm,
and I think we'll see some of that as well.
yeah, it should be interesting to see. I guess I'm holding my breath. Or maybe I'm not. Am I? I don't know if I'm holding my breath actually. I have no idea what I'm doing. All I know is that it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. And then, I feel like also with these like governmental changes, like it takes so long for changes to, generally speaking, actually be executed on, that sometimes it's like it feels like sometimes there's all of this commotion that's created because of the like huge, like polarizing changes, and then it's like the change is made for a year, and then you go back, and then there's the whiplash again. So maybe I am holding my breath. Maybe I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing, like I said.
I think, at least speaking for myself, I think I'm definitely holding my breath on some of these things because it not only is there, like, to your point about, once you have a right, it's really hard to live without that right. And I think we're
Hmm.
we're seeing that, We saw that with the overturning of Roe a few years ago,
Right,
and
right.
we're
Yeah.
seeing that in different states that are trying to go even further. Um, I think
Yeah.
that's sort of the collective breath holding at the moment, is like, what's next? What other rights am I going to lose?
Right,
And
right. What
so
other shoe will
I,
drop?
I yeah, and I think to your point of the whiplash, I think that's part of it. Like, it's chaotic. All of this. I mean, HR
Mm-hmm.
has never been,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't want to speak in absolutes. HR has rarely been a stable environment. You're always dealing with something that's coming
Totally.
up, but this seems
It's
like
true.
more chaos than normal. This seems like it's just constant whiplash, constant head spinning of like, where are we going now? What am I doing? And I think in some states, like you said, New York, Illinois, California, Washington, a few others, they are creating some of that stability in the absence of that stability from the federal government.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. I guess we'll see then. And this is there is no great way to segue into the second topic, as you know. But because like what is the segue? But I'll let everyone know that it has to do with a really strange, bizarre uh ability, like lack of ability for someone to think critically, I would say. And so rather than introduce the title, I'm just going to read through what we've got here. So an employee, I think in Texas, actually, if I am recalling what I quickly looked up just before, an employee thought it would be hilarious to show up to the office Halloween party dressed as a suicide bomber, and was shocked when he got fired. See, there is no great way to segue into that sentence, other than what the heck was this person thinking on so many levels, which Bryan and I did definitely have some discourse around this before we started recording. And so this person's reaction tells you everything, or the reaction in general, I should say, tells you everything about the company's culture. Somehow, this employee thought that that costume would be okay at this particular company, or at least that no one would call him out. And that is the problem that so many of us have seen many times, certainly Bryan and I. And what happens here is not just that one person makes a bad choice. The bigger issue for HR is having other employees wondering if they're going to do anything about it. That, what a wonderful way to sum that up, Bryan, by the way, because it is true. It puts, naturally, this is, I think everyone should realize why this is not okay. Um, but there is, or I should say, and there is so much pressure that's put on HR and leadership to do something when someone has done something wrong. And that pressure, I think we can all probably feel that. We know exactly what that feels like. Oh my gosh, now I need to respond. What does the company response look like? Is it strong enough? Is it not strong enough? Do we fire someone? Do we not fire someone? And that I think is, it's not a conundrum. It's not nuanced, because there are some things I think where good and bad, or right and wrong, are very black and white, like this. Um, and yet, based on what we just talked about, that this company culture is kind of seen in this person's decision, I would imagine maybe for them, there was more discussion than maybe for others, or what would have been present for others. So, Bryan, I'm going to pass to you. Why are we talking about this today? Why does this matter for all of us in HR?
I think I will say one thing that sort of sums up
Hmm.
kind of the whole topic and the whole reason I think we're talking about this. And that is, the way you respond or don't respond when someone crosses a line in your organization, that is your culture. Your response or lack of response is your culture. You can say everything you want. You can have all the motivational posters you want. You can have all the pizza parties that people scoff at. That's not culture. This is your culture.
Perfectly said. Hmm. Hmm.
And so that I think is the point that really matters to HR. I mean, look, every offensive costume for Halloween parties, every offensive joke, every situation that goes up to the line, that pushes the line, that crosses the line is just that. It's just bad culture. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's HR's job to police people's taste. I don't think the dressing up as a suicide bomber is anyone's taste. I think it's just
Right.
wrong. Um, but I think it is HR's job to make sure everybody knows where the boundaries are. And sure, I would make the argument that dressing up as a suicide bomber is probably not a boundary you need to specifically address. It
Even think
should
about?
be
Right.
yeah, it should be common sense
Yeah.
that this is across the line. Um,
Mm,
Apparently, in
yeah.
some cases, it's not. But you can't build a respectful workplace, and more importantly, you can't build a safe workplace, a workplace where people feel free to be themselves, to be open, to be honest, to be transparent, and to show up and do the work you need them to do if you keep hiring people that don't respect the values that you say you have, and if you don't do anything about it when they cross that line.
1,010%, more than 1,010%. I agree with you on every single point that you made. And it makes me think about those godforsaken anti-harassment training videos, which, by the way, I have a very specific pet peeve when people say harassment training. We are not training people on
Right.
how to harass. We are training people on how not to harass, you know? So like I make a really distinct point. It's anti-harassment, anti-sexual harassment. Like I don't know. I kind of like die inside a little bit when someone's like, I haven't taken my sexual harassment training yet. I'm like, good. That's not what we want. Um, anyway, I digress. My point here is that those videos, which they are very corny and they're like really mocked up, and the actors are like, Bryan touched my shoulder and I didn't appreciate it, and quid pro quo, and all that stuff, right? But this is actually a really great example of how important it is to take the information from an anti harassment training, for example, and understand why when a leader doesn't do something, because so much of those training videos are about what the manager's response is supposed to be in order to be compliant with the law, let alone doing the right thing, that is what allows you to see something as insane as this example, and understanding that this is the why. That, to your point, when HR or other leaders are not or maybe it's not that they're not doing something, but that they're tolerating bad behaviors, or they allow or maybe even enable things that end up becoming part of the culture like this, that all of this boils up into this bigger issue. And so no matter how corny those anti-harassment training videos are, they're telling a very specific story that you as a leader have a responsibility to not only that particular employee or group of employees, also to the company, to say this is right and this is wrong. And I think, for this person who was shocked that he got fired, like that does tell a very specific story about this company, that other people have probably done similar, maybe worse, maybe better things that are obviously not correct and not appropriate and frankly disgusting, that have been just allowed, and there haven't been any you know uh consequences as a result of those actions or behaviors. So it to me it's all related, and frankly someone could easily say that this person created a hostile work environment because maybe they have a family member who died at the hands of a suicide bomber, or maybe they just found the costume to be in such poor taste that they felt uncomfortable. Like that, all of these things are so related to what we hope leaders are walking away with an understanding of. But I think you're absolutely right that there's an indication of culture here, and there's certainly an indication of lack of critical thinking on part of the employee. But it definitely does bring back around that we have so many responsibilities, not only as employers but also as leaders or HR leaders.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point about training too, because one of the things that I've always done with clients is to make sure that we have two trainings. We have an anti-harassment training for the whole company, But then we also have one specifically for managers. And to your point, that goes into
Mm-hmm.
what do you do? Because these types of things will come up. So what do you do? Sure,
Mm-hmm.
you can learn about the anti-harassment procedures and like what might cross a line, what's illegal. And now, to be clear, some states are actually starting to require these two sets of trainings, which is great, so that managers know what to do and how to handle these
Mm-hmm.
situations. Um, but it's crucial that managers are given the tools to not only spot these things, because a lot of times employees won't come to you with a complaint, they'll just quit. They'll go take a new job.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll
Mm-hmm.
you'll never know why. So it's important for managers to not only be able to field those complaints when they do come, but also spot these issues on their own and take appropriate action um, uh, based on what they're seeing, what their culture is, what's important, and of course what they need to do in order to remain compliant.
Totally. And when I think back on some experiences that I've had in my career, now over 10 years long, um, I have seen companies that are really decisive and allow HR leaders to be really decisive and say, hey, this is not okay. We don't tolerate this. This is not who we are. And this is the action we're going to take. And I have unfortunately seen companies who are like, well, there's some gray area here. And it places a little bit of difficulty on part of onto the HR leader to assert the right thing. And I think that that is it can be a very challenging place to work in, meaning not like work environment, although I'm sure that those environments are not so easy to work in either. But when I think about like an HR leader and the nuance that's already there for being in this role that is, kind of dual in that you're an employee and you're asserting company direction. And so like if the company or senior leaders don't um give you the autonomy and the reign to say this is how we address these types of issues because they are issues and we don't tolerate them, that it makes it just so much more difficult to actually assert the right thing, which is where I think that there's an impact here for HR leaders and non HR leaders. And for example, with this employee, like, did that person's boss like tolerate a bunch of crazy stuff from this employee before that then, again, made them feel that this was totally appropriate to come to work in this costume? It's just, it's a little bit mind boggling, but I know that it exists out there. And it makes it hard. It makes it hard for people who want to do the right thing to do the right thing and say no, this is not what we tolerate. But you do still have to assert yourself naturally if you know that the right thing is one way versus the other.
And I think that's an extremely important point because often HR is sort of in that what's an analogy? HR is oftentimes like the senior staff to the president, where they have to be able to tell truth to power, where sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to go in that room and say, I'm going to make this more blunt than normal, what you normally would in this situation, but like I need you to stop doing this. I need you to act
Yeah.
differently. Um, if the leaders or if the CEO, the owner, whatever, is acting in such a way that could be considered encouragement of this type of behavior, because all it's doing is making your job as an HR professional just that much more difficult and undermining you because
Totally.
you're saying these things and you're talking about these policies and procedures and compliance, and leaders are by their own actions sort of counteracting that, and that is
Mm-hmm.
it's a nearly impossible place for HR people to be, especially HR teams of one, because you've got nobody to talk to. You've got nobody to help you.
Yeah.
And I think that again, that's a challenging spot for HR because HR is often seen, especially in smaller businesses, as sort of a speed bump to growth, as an unnecessary thing in a company. And so leaders oftentimes already have that viewpoint. They already have that sort of bias in their heads. And so if HR is going to tell them to stop doing something or to change their behavior, who the hell are you to tell? I don't even want you. Like, what? Why
Mm-hmm.
should I listen to you about what you want? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that that's a great point because it's oftentimes HR. HR can oftentimes feel like a siloed department, even if you do have a team with you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's challenging
That's
to
true.
be able to stand up to the owner of the company, to a CEO, and say, "You're encouraging this type of behavior. This is why it keeps happening."
Mm-hmm. It is. It is hard to do, and it's so important to do it. Which is why, like, not everyone is meant to be in like an HR business partner type of role. Because if you don't have a loud voice, or if you don't feel comfortable asserting your own opinion, um, which can't relate, then, frankly, um, then that's just not the path for you, and that's totally okay. But I've met HR, I have former HR colleagues and who are like, I never, ever, ever want to be on the business partner track because I don't want to deal with employee relations. I don't want to have to assert my opinion. I just want to get the job done and know exactly, like run some reports, analyze, and whatever. And that's totally okay. But I think self awareness is really important in a lot of these roles because you do have to have some pretty difficult conversations, especially as you scale and grow and scale in scope. But yeah, so if you're like, oh God, I hate telling someone what I think, or it makes me nervous to tell someone who's higher ranked than me that they're doing something wrong, then definitely reconsider the business partner track, because it just might not be the right one for you because inevitably you're in a situation where you have to do that
Absolutely. At some time or
inevitably.
another,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a tough conversation with an employee. You're gonna have a tough conversation with a manager. You're gonna have a tough conversation with the CEO.
Hmm.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, and certainly for teams of one, to your point. I mean, that I remember one time I interviewed for a job, this is a long time ago, and it was like party of one HR role in a luxury company that was like, fashion company that was like building. And I was like, it wasn't the being the party of one that I didn't like. It was that I had to do payroll that I didn't want to do, and that's why I didn't take the job. But other people, they're like, "Oh yeah, payroll, totally cool." But when you're a party of one, to your point, you have no one to bounce these things off of unless you have a really strong network of colleagues around you, in other companies. But even still, it's like you have to be like really concerted in your efforts and like really strong in your beliefs around like the right thing to do. You have to have strong best practices. It's tough, a very tough position to be in, to be totally alone in a department that generally is, overlooked for its
It
importance.
is.
Yeah.
It is, and it's stressful, and exhausting because you've always got to be on. You've always got to be ready
Yep.
for the next thing. You've always got to be ready for the next question, the compliance question. And yeah, it's tough. It is tough. I
Yeah.
I definitely
Yeah.
definitely empathize with people in that position. I've been in it myself years ago. It's tough.
Yeah. Totally. And to close us out in this segment and for this week, but also the last of 2025, can't believe it. I know that I'm going to pass to you, Bryan, because I know you have had a ton of questions that you get each and every week that I think could be a good opportunity for us to talk about.
Yeah, one of the questions that I get sort of in different forms, and I've been getting this one for a while, but it seems to be ramping up in the last couple of months, and it revolves around essentially companies asking me, how do we convince our employees to come back to the office? And if you have to convince them, you've already lost. You've lost their trust. You've lost the whole point of bringing them back into the office. And
Hmm.
and I think, at least in my opinion and in my experience, the reason that I say that is because employees see it as just nothing more than control. If the only reason to bring people back to the office is because leadership likes seeing people in their seats, then you're making very clear, very transparent that you simply do not trust your team. Um, If you want
Mm-hmm.
people to come back in the office, give them a genuine reason, give them a legitimate business reason, something that makes sense, something that they can latch onto, something that they can trust is a true and honest reason. There are many reasons why being in office makes sense. There are many reasons why being remote makes sense. There are many reasons why hybrid makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and there are cons to all of those as well. Um, if you want people back in the office because collaboration is dropped, or new employees aren't getting the mentorship that they need, or customer experience has taken a hit, those are legitimate reasons to want to bring people together. Does it mean you need people in the office 5 days a week? Probably not. Can you go with some hybrid thing? Sure, but have that transparent discussion with your employees. If you can't explain why being in the office matters, employees will simply treat it like another compliance exercise to show up, do the bare minimum, and count the hours until they can leave. Um, I think that um, for HR, if you're being asked to send out another Slack message, another email that says everyone must be in the office 3 days a week, everybody must be in the office 5 days a week, you should ask yourself, or as a leader in a company too, ask yourself one question: would I come in for that reason? If the answer is no, then go back and find a better reason. Don't make one up. I'm
Yeah.
not saying make one up, but go back and find a legitimate business reason, a genuine reason that people will believe and understand and stand behind, for why you want people to come back into the office. I think that is in,
Absolutely.
like I said, in some way, shape, or form, one of the most frequent questions I've been getting the last few months.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that this question comes up because it's an important topic, and frankly, I have gone on record probably 1,001 times on my podcast saying I will never go back in the office. No one could ever make me, because I love being remote and it offers me a lot of flexibility. And yet, as much as I say that, I'm also like, well, if a company said to me, okay, well, we need you in 1 day a week, we can, you can figure out what that day looks like I wouldn't be opposed. But I think to this end, as you mentioned about control, that would be the key for me, that I need to have control over my life and my schedule. And maybe you'd even get another day out of me if you gave me that type of flexibility. And I don't think that I'm this anomaly to in this regard. I think most people, we certainly this see this with Gen Z, and probably later generations too, that people want the ultimate flexibility. They want to have the option to be in the office, so they want there to be space, but they also don't want to be told when to come in. And I think that's where, when you say, hey, we have this office space, we want people to use it 1 day a week minimum, figure out what that day is, people probably would go in more frequently than if they were told you need to have your butts in your seats 3 days a week. Because who wants to be told what to do after 4 or 5 years of successfully working remotely, and where most businesses have made a tremendous amount of money, more than they did prior to COVID? And I think that is the issue. And frankly, I think companies need to remember that did not they did not hire dummies. Like they hired people who have their wits about them, with the exception of the guy who was fired for the costume that he wore. He's the exception here. Um, and they're going to be able to put those things together, that they were successfully working and executing while remote. Why can they not continue to do that? And so, yeah, to your point, there's a trust issue now, and that's not great.
There is, and I think to your point about control, I think it goes back to the discussion about rights. This is the flexibility, the control over your own time is a right that employees have become accustomed to. And
Hmm.
some employers are trying to take that right away. And I think that is part of the issue, that it's mandating that employees come back to the office, not requesting or opening a line of communication about some sort of hybrid environment. There are certainly reasons why people might not want to come back to the office. Maybe they've moved. It's now a 2-hour commute each way. They're not doing that. That makes sense. They've moved across the country. Makes sense. But
Hmm.
if the whole point is to bring people into the office for a legitimate good reason, then there's a way to find a compromise. There's a way to find that common ground where employees can still retain that right of flexibility, that right of control over their time. I mean, look at it this way. Sure, a lot of this is sleeping time, but there's 168 hours in a work week, right? And there in a week, there's 40 that your employer gets from you. Some employers require more, but 40 traditionally, right? So that's less than half. Why should my employer dictate what I do for essentially the entirety of those hours, not just the 40?
Love that.
And I think that
totally.
that's something I've heard from employees and from individuals making career transitions. They're doing it for those types of reasons, that it's their employer is trying to take back the control over, essentially the way they see it, over their private time, their private hours.
I think that's a great point. I never thought of things that way. But I guess we'll continue to see how things evolve. I mean, certainly the job market and the landscape in that regard has changed quite a bit, at least from where I stand. It seems that it has. And I think that companies, it doesn't matter that there are people on unemployment. Companies are always in a deficit of talent. Always, because unless it's, a family run business where you're not hiring people on the outside and you always have, 100% attrition, and some companies do have, close to that. It doesn't pay for companies to do something that then risks their attrition rates or their tenure rates. Like, don't you want to figure out what is going to engage your people the most so that you can retain them and elevate your tenure and keep people around and continue to do great business? Like, to me, that's really just so intrinsic in the way that I think, that it's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. People want flexibility. Let's give them flexibility because that keeps them happy and it ensures better retention. But not everyone thinks that way, especially when there is a concern from someone at a leadership level that people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But maybe that person's just projecting. I don't know. Like, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing if you think that others are not doing what they're supposed to be doing? Just saying. I don't know. But anyway, Bryan, thank you so much for your time on this segment, and in general for helping first of all, for being a part of these segments, but also helping kick off what has become a very exciting part of the podcast menu, so to speak, every month. And so really appreciate it. I think all the listeners have a lot to look forward to in 2026. And there probably, hopefully, will be some Supreme Court decisions that ice cream on the brain, Supreme Court decisions that we can hopefully talk about in 2026 that, again, adding to the whiplash, but that's okay. This is part of our job. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And all of your information, of course, is in the show notes for everyone to connect with you.
Thank you, Traci. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to talking about some of those Supreme Court cases, I think, and maybe some ice cream too. Maybe we can.
And maybe some ice cream too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I love it. Awesome. See you next year. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.